Ladies and gentlemen, we've all faced it. That moment when someone we cared for, hoped for, maybe even loved, looked us in the eye and said, "No." Rejection, it stings, it lingers. And if we're not careful, it starts to whisper lies. You weren't enough. You should have done more. You should have been different. But tonight, I want to bring you back to the truth, because no matter who walked away, no matter who failed to choose you, rejection does not define your worth. Not then, not now, not ever. Let's talk about why. There's something quietly powerful about the moment you choose not to respond. Not because you don't have something to say, but because you know that saying it won't change a thing. In fact, sometimes silence says it all. It holds the weight of everything you could have screamed, cried, or written in paragraphs, and delivers it with more clarity than any speech ever could. When someone rejects you, there's a natural urge to speak. To explain, to defend, to ask for understanding. You might want to ask them why. You might feel compelled to share how deeply you felt, how real it was for you, or how unfair the timing seems. But when you take a breath and choose silence instead, you shift the energy entirely. Your silence doesn't mean you weren't affected. It doesn't mean you didn't care. It simply means you respected yourself enough not to hand your emotions over to someone who has already shown you they're not willing to hold them properly. And that speaks volumes, because while you're quiet, they hear everything. They hear the confidence you now walk in. They notice the absence of your presence, how your name no longer appears in their notifications, how your attention no longer arrives with consistency or warmth. You're not cold, you're just gone, and there's nothing more unsettling than someone who used to orbit your life disappearing without a trace, especially when you thought they'd stay. That's the power of silence. It creates space, and in that space they start to think, not always immediately, but eventually. They wonder why you didn't try harder. They question whether they misread your intentions. They try to remember if they were wrong in assuming you'd still be there. Because silence forces reflection, it puts them in the position of the one left behind, something they might not have expected to feel. Silence also prevents you from giving away your dignity. There's a fine line between vulnerability and desperation. Expressing your feelings once, vulnerable, honest, brave, but chasing someone after they've clearly let go. That's no longer vulnerability, it's self, betrayal, and silence draws that line with quiet strength. It communicates, I could have fought for this, but I won't fight you to see my value. And maybe that's the part that haunts them the most, not what you said, but what you didn't, not the love you offered, but the fact that you walked away with it intact. You didn't leave pieces of yourself behind, scattered in late-night texts and one-sided conversations. You took it all with you. That silence, that's you choosing yourself. It also invites healing. Speaking too soon, especially when emotions are rock and reopen wounds and fuel confusion. Silence gives you room to listen to your own needs instead of chasing answers from someone who's already chosen not to meet them. It creates space for you to rise above the chaos, to process without external noise, and to realize that closure doesn't always come in the form of dialogue. Sometimes closure comes from walking away without needing to be understood. And here's the twist. The more peace you find in that silence, the more noticeable your absence becomes. People sense it, the shift in energy, the strength in restraint, the maturity it takes to let things end without dragging them through unnecessary words and explanations. That kind of silence is not passive, it's deliberate, it's confident. It's rooted in the belief that if someone doesn't choose you freely, you won't beg for their effort. It's a refusal to fill the space with noise just to avoid the discomfort of quiet. And in a world where people often speak out of fear, silence becomes an act of courage. So yes, your silence may be misinterpreted at first. They might think you didn't care. They might tell themselves you moved on too quickly or that it was never real for you. let them, because at some point they'll realize the truth, that your silence wasn't emptiness, it was everything. Every boundary you drew, every tear you refused to shed in front of them, every ounce of self-worth you reclaimed the moment you stopped explaining yourself. In the end, silence isn't about punishing someone. It's about preserving you. It's the sound of strength, the echo of grace, the pause that protects your peace. And whether or not they ever come to understand it, they'll never forget how it felt. Because silence, when chosen with purpose, will always speak louder than anything you could have said. Because that's how it usually goes, right? Someone pulls away and the other person instinctively moves closer. He thought you'd follow that pattern. He thought that even after he let you down, whether gently, vaguely, or harshly, you'd still be there orbiting, that you'd still answer his messages, still like his posts. Still check in, still linger, because in his mind he expected to reject you and keep your presence. Maybe he didn't do it with cruel intent. Maybe he genuinely thought he was doing the right thing by letting you go. Maybe he thought he was sparing your feelings, but he also thought you'd make it easier for him by staying emotionally available. He thought that, even after the rejection, you'd hold the door open, that you'd keep the emotional connection intact, that you'd give him the comfort of being missed, without the commitment of actually choosing you. He didn't expect silence. He didn't expect distance. He didn't expect that you would take him at his word and walk, without theatrics, without a fight, without clinging to the idea of what you could have been. That wasn't part of his plan, because the truth is, when people end things, they often secretly hope for proof that they were wanted. It feeds the ego, it's reassuring, it confirms that someone cared enough to try to hold on, but when you don't give them that, when you step away with calm, grounded finality, it confuses them, it unsettles them. He expected questions, he expected emotional responses, he expected a follow-up, a long text, a conversation where you'd ask what went wrong or tell him how much he meant to you. He expected proof of impact. And when you didn't give it, it made him wonder, not because he suddenly realized he loved you, but because your reaction, or lack of it, told him something about you that he hadn't noticed before. You don't beg to stay where you're not wanted. He underestimated you. He thought your value was tied to how much you needed him. He didn't see that your strength wasn't in your vulnerability, but in your ability to let go with grace. He mistook your openness for dependency. He assumed your softness meant you wouldn't walk away without resistance. So when you did, without a single emotional scene, he was caught off guard, and maybe at first he told himself it didn't matter. Maybe he was relieved, maybe he said to his friends, "She handled it well," as if your calm was casual, as if it cost you nothing. But then days passed, and weeks, and still no trace of you, no message. No reaction, no reach, and now it's not relief he feels, it's something else, it's curiosity, it's confusion, it's discomfort, it's that slow, building awareness that maybe you weren't the one chasing after love, maybe you were the one deciding whether he deserved it in the first place. He thought he had you figured out, that if he ever ended things you'd hold on, that you'd stay emotionally entangled just long enough to make him feel powerful. But power fades quickly when it's not being fed. And right now, you're not feeding it, you're not validating his decision, you're not giving him anything to hold onto. And in that silence, in your absence, he's starting to realize something he never considered. Maybe he lost someone rare, because vanishing, quietly, confidently, and without malice, sends a message he can't ignore. It wasn't a tantrum, it wasn't a strategy, it wasn't a game, it was you showing that his decision was final. That you heard him, that you respected it, that you respected yourself, and now he's left to sit with what he thought would be easy. He thought letting go of you would be simple, because he expected you to still be around. But he didn't lose someone who clings. He lost someone who knows when to walk. And when someone expects a chase but gets silence instead, the thing they once dismissed starts to look a lot like something they wish they hadn't let go. At first, it may not seem that way. You walk away quietly, without drama, without a speech, without making it a big production. You just stop showing up. You stop reaching out, stop reacting, stop trying to prove anything. And maybe, in that initial silence, he feels free. Maybe he even thinks you were never that attached, that you just got over it. But then something strange starts to happen. He begins to notice the space you left behind. It's subtle at first. He scrolls through his phone and your name isn't there. Not in his messages, not in his notifications. He posts something he knows you would have commented on or reacted to, but this time there's nothing. Just stillness, and for a while he tells himself it's fine. Maybe he even tries to convince himself that it's what he wanted. But then a question creeps in. Where did you go? See, when you were there, consistent, open, emotionally available, he thought he had you figured out. You were the one who texted first, who showed interest, who checked in. You were familiar, predictable, comforting even, but now that you've pulled back completely, there's a gap, and in that gap, his mind starts to wander. He doesn't know what you're thinking. He doesn't know how you're feeling. He doesn't know if you're hurting or healing, or if you've already met someone else. That uncertainty starts to eat at him, because for the first time, he's not in control of the narrative. You're no longer accessible, no longer explaining yourself, no longer making it easy for him to know what role, if any, he still plays in your world, and that's where the mystery begins. People tend to take what's familiar for granted. They stop looking closely. They stop appreciating the effort. But when you remove your energy, your attention, your presence, it shakes things up. You were once predictable, and now you're unknown. You were once available, and now you're unreachable. And that shift makes him look at you differently, because mystery always creates value, not because you're playing games, but because you're no longer giving him everything for free. When he doesn't know what you're doing, he starts imagining. When he doesn't know who you're with, he starts wondering, and wondering leads to questioning. About you, about what he had, about what he lost, because there's something incredibly attractive about someone who doesn't explain their every move. Someone who moves in silence, someone who walks away and doesn't look back to see if they were followed. Your absence isn't just quiet, it's powerful. It changes the dynamic. It turns you from someone he thought he understood into someone he realizes he barely knew. And when people feel they've lost access to something, they often start to value it more, not because they didn't care before, but because it's easy to overlook something that's always there. It's easy to think someone will always be around until one day they're not. And now he's left to fill in the blanks. He's left with the silence, the unanswered questions, the gaps in the story. And no matter how confident or emotionally detached he seemed before, that mystery will sit with him. Because absence forces reflection, it forces imagination, it forces a shift in perspective, and once someone starts looking at you through the lens of curiosity instead of certainty, everything starts to change. The value of your presence becomes clearer once it's no longer given so freely. He starts to think about how you made him feel, the way you listened, the way you understood, the way you showed up. And now, with all of that gone, he realizes it wasn't just about attention. It was about connection. One that he no longer has access to. He may never admit any of this out loud. He may never send a message or reach back out. But internally, he feels it, the shift, the loss, the mystery you left behind. And while he sits with that, trying to understand what changed, you're already moving forward, not to prove a point, not to teach him a lesson, but because your energy now belongs to something greater, yourself. Your absence doesn't just leave a space in his life, it creates a new space in yours, one where your value is no longer up for negotiation and your mystery is yours to keep. It's easy for people to misread silence, to label it as coldness, manipulation, or emotional immaturity, especially in a world where people are expected to explain everything, where every feeling has to be shared, and every ending needs closure. When you choose to go silent, especially after being hurt or rejected, it's often interpreted as punishment, but silence, when it's real, isn't about revenge or control. It's about reclaiming your dignity. When someone treats you like an option, when they hesitate about you, when they fail to show up in the way you deserve, silence becomes a decision, not to hurt them, not to spark guilt, but to protect your peace. It's a boundary in its purest form. It says, I will not keep offering myself to someone who isn't choosing me fully. There's no anger in it, no pettiness, just a quiet withdrawal of energy, time, and attention from where it's no longer being valued. That kind of silence is powerful because it's not performative. It doesn't demand to be seen. It doesn't need validation. It exists whether the other person notices or not, because it's not about them. It's about you. It's about recognizing that you don't have to plead your case to be understood, or beg for someone to stay just to feel worthy. It's realizing that stepping back doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise enough to know when someone is no longer aligned with your value. Some people expect words to chase them. They expect you to try harder, to explain yourself, to fix what they damaged. They expect you to keep showing up even after they've made it clear that they won't. And when you don't, when you go silent instead, it disrupts their expectations. Suddenly, they're not in control of the dynamic anymore. They're not the ones deciding how this ends, because you didn't argue, you didn't cling, you didn't try to change their mind. You simply stepped away, and stepping away doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. Conscious of your worth, conscious of your energy, conscious of what kind of love you want and what kind you're no longer willing to settle for. Silence isn't passive, it's intentional. It's a choice to stop giving yourself to someone who couldn't see you when you were right in front of them. Sometimes silence is the only way to break a cycle. If words didn't change anything, if explaining yourself only led to more pain, more confusion, more false hope, then silence is what allows you to finally take your power back. It's the pause that stops you from rewriting the same story over and over again. It's the breath you take before choosing to rewrite your narrative on your own terms. And yes, silence can be misunderstood. People may think you don't care, that you've shut down, that you're playing some kind of emotional chess, but you know the truth. You know that your silence isn't a tactic. It's the only way left to say, I matter even when I'm not chosen. I matter even when I'm not heard. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can do is walk away without needing to be chased. It takes courage to be silent, especially when you still have things to say, especially when your heart is full of questions and your mind is replaying every moment. But courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's you sitting with your own pain, resisting the urge to reach out, and reminding yourself that you deserve more than one-sided effort. And in that silence, you begin to heal, you begin to reconnect with yourself, you stop trying to be understood by someone who doesn't have the capacity to understand you, you stop waiting for validation from the very person who couldn't show up when it mattered. Silence creates space to grow, to process, to move forward. People may try to read into your silence. They may wonder what it means, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Let them. You don't owe everyone access to your inner world. You don't have to explain every decision you make in order for it to be valid. Your silence speaks not because it's strategic, but because it's honest, because it's strong. Because it's rooted in the kind of self-respect that no one can take from you, not even the person who once had the power to hurt you, but it can feel like it does, especially when it's someone you truly saw a future with, someone you were open for, someone you let in. It's human to take rejection personally, to replay every moment, to ask yourself what you could have done differently, to wonder if you were too much or not enough. You start scanning your past with them like a detective, searching for the exact second it all shifted. But that's the trap, that spiral of self. Doubt begins to chip away at your self-esteem, making it seem like someone else's inability to choose you must mean you're lacking. But it doesn't. Their choice is not a verdict on your value. Sometimes people walk away not because you aren't good enough, but because they aren't ready. Sometimes they leave because they don't know how to receive what you're offering. Sometimes they're too wrapped up in their own mess, too afraid of real connection, too distracted by their own uncertainty. And in those moments, it's not your job to convince them of your worth. It's not your job to shrink so they feel taller. It's not your job to beg for space in someone's life who can't see what's right in front of them. The truth is, rejection says more about where the other person is than where you are. Maybe they didn't have the emotional maturity to handle someone like you. Maybe they weren't ready for depth or honesty or intimacy that isn't laced with games. That doesn't make you wrong for offering those things. It makes them unprepared to receive them. But when you're in the middle of the hurt, that's hard to remember. It's easy to start believing that their no means you're not worthy of a yes, but your worth isn't tied to whether someone stays or leaves. It's not dependent on someone else's ability to recognize your value. You don't become less lovable because one person didn't love you the way you hoped. You don't become invisible just because someone failed to see you. Your qualities, your kindness, your loyalty, your presence, all of that still exists whether someone appreciated it or not. Rejection is painful, but it can also be revealing. It shows you who is emotionally aligned with you and who isn't. It clears the space, even when it hurts, for someone who actually sees you. It removes the illusion of potential so that you're no longer stuck in a story that wasn't truly serving you. And if you let it, it can teach you something powerful, not about what you lack, but about what you deserve. You deserve someone who doesn't need convincing, someone who sees your effort, your light, your depth, and meets you there. Someone who doesn't treat your vulnerability as a burden or your love as a question mark. But to attract that kind of energy, you have to believe you're worthy of it first, and that belief can't come from someone choosing you. It has to come from choosing yourself, especially in the face of rejection. Because when you really sit with it, rejection is not the end of your value. It's not a cancellation of your beauty, your intelligence, your heart. It's a moment, a hard one, yes, but still just a moment. It doesn't erase the way you made someone feel. It doesn't take away the good you brought to the table. It doesn't mean you failed. It means the connection didn't align for reasons that might always remain unknown to you, and that's okay. You don't have to be bitter. You don't have to prove them wrong. You don't have to carry that rejection like a scar that shapes how you show up moving forward. You can let it go, not because it didn't hurt, but because it doesn't define you. You're allowed to grieve it without internalizing it. You're allowed to feel it fully and still remember your worth isn't on trial. And as time passes, as healing comes, you'll begin to see it differently. You'll realize that what someone couldn't give you wasn't a reflection of what you lacked, but a reflection of their own limitations, and you'll thank yourself for not settling, for not twisting into someone smaller just to be accepted. You'll look back and understand that rejection didn't break you. It redirected you, and your worth, it was never in question, not then, not now, not ever.